There is a cruel paradox that runs through the centuries. Everyone claims to want the truth, but when it shows itself bare, almost no one can stand it. In politics, we demand transparency. In relationships, we ask for honesty. In religion, we proclaim the search for light. But when someone comes along to reveal what's really hidden behind the veil, our reaction is not gratitude. We burn them. We silence them. We exile them from ordinary life. Socrates was silenced by hemlock, not because he preached violence, but because he dared to ask questions that stripped away the hypocrisy of Greece's proudest city. Giordano Bruno was burned alive for insisting the universe was infinite, too much clarity for a time that needed the illusion of control. Galileo was forced to recant so he wouldn't be crushed by the fury of the church, even though he knew the earth kept turning. And history repeats itself in our modern times. Edward Snowden exposed massive government surveillance and was forced into exile. Julian Assange published documents that revealed war crimes and was treated as a criminal. Chelsea Manning delivered the truth to the world and paid with years in prison. Alan Turing, who cracked the enemy's codes in the war, was persecuted and destroyed for loving differently. The truth, once exposed, is so uncomfortable that society prefers to punish the messenger rather than face the message. It's like at a family dinner. When someone points out an inconvenient contradiction, they're accused of ruining the mood. Now imagine that same reaction multiplied by billions of people, backed by power systems, religions, governments, and markets. That is the psychological weight of clarity. And when the mind begins to see what others don't, something curious happens. A silent dissonance arises, like background noise no one else notices, but for the lucid it becomes deafening. That is where the true curse begins, the conflict between the inner vision and the outer theater. Clarity is not just about seeing facts. It's about sensing the dissonance between what presents itself as normal and what is actually happening. Those who awaken begin to live between two frequencies, the inner noise of consciousness that won't quiet down and the outer chaos of a world that prefers illusions. Picture walking through a city. Billboards, screens, notifications, slogans, everything screams for attention. But when you look with clarity, you realize that almost nothing communicates anything essential. It's information without meaning, noise without melody. The lucid mind hears that dissonance like a buzzing that never stops. Alan Turing is a painful example of this noise. While most saw only war and chaos, he saw invisible patterns, cracked codes that saved millions. But the society that benefited from his brilliance couldn't handle his difference and condemned him for his homosexuality. His mind shone brighter than most, but his life was consumed by the noise of an era unable to handle clarity. This inner noise connects with depth psychology. Jung called it the encounter with a collective shadow, seeing what society as a whole tries to hide. When someone perceives that shadow, the outer world seems fake, staged. The awakened individual begins to notice the choreography, laughter hiding sadness, speeches masking interests, social rituals sustaining the illusion of order. Clarity is like hearing a different song in the middle of a crowd. Everyone dances to a choreography, but you notice the orchestra's dissonance. And once you hear it, there's no way to unhear it. But seeing is only the first step. What comes after is even harder. Because when someone sees what others avoid, they no longer find companionship on the same stage. The gaze that sees too much, sooner or later, discovers itself walking alone. The most immediate price of clarity is solitude. It's not just being physically alone, but feeling like a foreigner in your own world. The one who awakens discovers there is no longer a way to fit into shallow conversations, easy distractions, collective certainties. Hypatia of Alexandria is a symbol of this solitude. A wise woman in a world of men, a philosopher in a city torn between religious fanaticism and political power. She dared to teach science and philosophy when everyone else wanted dogma. She was stripped, dragged, and killed, not only for what she knew, but for the solitude of being ahead of her time. Trotsky, expelled from the revolution he helped build, lived in exile, hunted by those he once called comrades. His clarity about the direction of power condemned him to the margins until he was assassinated. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr., despite their different paths, shared the same solitude, knowing they spoke a truth that condemned them to death. This solitude is not a mistake. It is part of the path. In spiritual traditions, the hermit symbolizes this stage. In the tarot, the hermit walks alone with his lantern, lighting only one step at a time. In Sufism, the dervish retreats to the desert in search of divine presence. In Christianity, the dark night of the soul is the experience of isolation that precedes union with the sacred. The solitude of awakening is not punishment. It is initiation. It's in the absence of company that the soul learns to listen to itself. It's in the silence of exile that the inner voice grows stronger. Have you ever felt that the closer you got to your truth, the farther you drifted from the world? Yet solitude is not the last weight of clarity. There is another, even quieter one, the burden of what you know. Because it's not enough to be alone. You must learn to carry inside you the truth that can never be forgotten. To know is to carry. Information can liberate, but it can also become an unbearable weight. Those who see too much often wish they could forget. But the awakened mind cannot go back. Once you see, there's no way to unsee. Robespierre believed the clarity of reason could purify the French Revolution. But his vision of justice turned into the guillotine, and he himself ended under the blade he raised. His clarity was both light and condemnation. That is the dilemma of lucid knowledge. It illuminates, but it also burns. In Greek mythology, Prometheus stole fire from the gods to give it to humanity. That fire was knowledge, clarity. But as punishment, he was chained and condemned to have his liver devoured daily by an eagle. Like Prometheus, every bearer of clarity carries an open wound. In Jungian psychology, this process is called individuation, the confrontation with one's own shadows, which requires enduring uncomfortable truths about oneself and the world. And here's the point: those who see too much can no longer live in the comfort of ignorance. This creates a psychological weight, an existential fatigue. And you? How do you deal with the weight of what you know? Do you turn your clarity into a torch that guides, or a stone that crushes your chest? And here lies another face of the curse. The knowledge that weighs also reveals an inevitable territory: suffering. Because seeing the truth often means facing pains the world prefers to hide. Clarity leads us, sooner or later, to meet suffering, not as punishment, but as a path. No one goes looking for suffering. But clarity shows that it is inevitable and, more than that, necessary. The examined life Socrates spoke of is inseparable from pain, because looking inward means finding wounds, frustrations, losses, impermanence. Martin Luther King Jr. understood that embracing collective suffering was the price of justice. His clarity didn't spare him from pain. On the contrary, it led him to martyrdom. But it was precisely that assumed suffering that became a flame for millions. Malcolm X, in another way, also understood pain as fuel. His anger was a legitimate response to centuries of oppression. His clarity wasn't peaceful, but it was true. Spiritual traditions echo this wisdom. In Buddhism, the first teaching of the Buddha is that life is marked by dukkha, suffering, dissatisfaction, impermanence. In Stoicism, Seneca and Marcus Aurelius taught that we shouldn't run from pain, but integrate it as an inevitable part of existence. In Sufism, Rumi turned pain into poetry. The wound is the place where the light enters you. The inconvenient truth is that suffering is not an enemy. It is a portal. It is through it that consciousness matures, the ego dissolves, the soul learns to dance with reality. And what if the pain you feel today isn't punishment, but initiation? But when you go through pain with open eyes, something surprising happens. On the other side of suffering, a territory even more unsettling appears: emptiness. The very thing everyone avoids, but which, for the lucid, reveals itself as fertile space, an invisible womb where life finds its true wholeness. We come to the final paradox: emptiness. Everything in our culture teaches us to avoid it. Fill it with consumption, distractions, performative spirituality, canned self-help phrases. But those who look with clarity discover that emptiness is fertile. It's like the vase, which is only useful because of the empty space inside it. It's like the cave, where silence allows the soul to speak. It's like the night, where the stars can only reveal themselves because of the darkness. Galileo, after being forced to renounce his discoveries, lived in seclusion. His silence was social emptiness, but within him there was fullness. He knew the earth kept turning. This emptiness is also what Rumi called a space of encounter with the divine, not an absence, but an invisible womb where the soul can be born again. In Christian mysticism, St. John of the Cross described the dark night of the soul as this emptiness necessary to find God. In Taoism, Wu Wei, non-forcing, arises precisely from accepting emptiness as the source of wholeness. We live in a society that fears emptiness because it tears down our masks. But clarity teaches, only in emptiness do we find real completeness. Have you ever allowed yourself to not fill anything? Not run, just be, and discover that emptiness was not absence, but presence in its purest form? From noise to silence, from solitude to fertile emptiness, the path shows us that curse and blessing are, in truth, two sides of the same coin. And those who dared to pay this price left us trails of light in the midst of shadows. The curse of clarity is the burden of those who see too much. It is living between inner noise and outer chaos. It is enduring the solitude of being ahead of your time. It is carrying the weight of knowledge that cannot be unsaid. It is crossing suffering as a portal of consciousness. It is embracing emptiness as the womb of completeness. Socrates drank the hemlock, but left the legacy of philosophy. Bruno was burned, but his vision paved the way for modern science. Snowden lives in exile, but his courage exposed the fragility of the freedom we thought we had. Rumi turned his pain into poetry that still awakens hearts today. Each of them paid the price of clarity, and each left seeds so we wouldn't walk in darkness. So I ask you, and you, what will you do with the clarity you already carry? Will it be the weight that drags you down, or the torch that transforms you? Take a deep breath. As you inhale, feel the weight of the clarity you carry. As you exhale, allow that weight to transform into a flame, not a flame that burns, but one that illuminates. Repeat silently, emptiness is not absence. It is the womb of the unseen. Pain is not punishment. It is the soul's invitation. Clarity is not a curse. It is the path. Stay in that silence for a few moments. If these words touched something within you, maybe it's time to take another step on this path of reconnecting with your inner truth. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep receiving content that nourishes the soul with presence and authenticity. Share in the comments what resonated with your heart. Your story might be the mirror someone else needed to find. And if you'd like to stay in this vibration, watch the video we've linked in the card. It was chosen with care to continue this journey with you. Peace and light.